vaccines to attack that particular form of this sort of brain cyst. So it is a worry, and it's a lack of research.
Yeah. And thank you for... I'd love to ask you about monkey malaria, but I've got no time. But perhaps at another time, Dr. Bruce Russell, with us on the panel. Only time for one more thing, actually. Liam Neeson says he's going to stop playing tough guy roles in movies. Guys, I'm 65, guys. Audiences are going to go, come on, he said.
He put it with more force, though, didn't he, when he said he was 65?
Liam Neeson's become the master of threatening dialogue in movies as he seeks righteous revenge.
I have a particular set of skills.
He's very good at it, and here he is.
Not.
Oh, that wasn't too bad. No.
That was terrible.
I got a particular set of skills. That's what it is there. That's right. Except he plays an American, doesn't he, in Taken?
Here he is on Jimmy Kimmel, threatening an audience member named Matthew, who said he wanted to be scared witless.
I want you to listen very carefully, Matthew. Before this night's over, I will kill you. But before I kill you, I will make you suffer pain so unimaginable, you will wiggle and beg and pray for the gift of death. Eventually, I will give you that gift.
It even gets more horrible
when you
than
wake up in hell,
you
won't find peace.
He's very good at it, isn't he?
This is like a perfect opening statement, though, to a movie, right? You know, I'm quitting. I'm too old for this. And so I've come up with this. It's like, in a world where a man said he was too old, he found out he was just old enough. Senior citizen arrest. Got your gold cards. Super gold card at the ready. I like senior citizen arrest.
Yeah.
At what age?
I'm still scared by that.
I'm scared by Penny's voice.
I'm scared.
I was even slightly frightened when you were there. At what age do you think we stop seeing people as vigorous? Do you think Liam Neeson could actually carry on quite easily being scary?
Well, yes, and the whole Hollywood thing is about you never grow old, right? The whole industry there is about keeping them young.
As a man, yeah.
Well, yeah, no, more so as a man.
Definitely, if a woman was that age, she'd be like, oh, he'd be just shuffling,
I remember interviewing Anthony Hopkins when he came to New Zealand to do the Indian movie, The World's Fastest Indian, and him saying, sitting in his caravan down outside of Invercargill going, this is probably my last film.
Right.
I'm done. I'm too old. Yeah.
He's done a lot since then.
Just so many films since then. So
if only women had that luxury.
And he's still going on doing scary stuff, you know,
Whereas women disappear from screen from about 40 onwards. Just ask Gina Davis, who has a whole thing about
Sorry,
it.
who?
Gina exactly. I fell for that. Invisibility, etc. Like it's a luxury to be able to retire and say you're too old for things, whereas women get shuffled off a lot earlier. So
unless you're called Meryl.
Unless you're called Meryl or Judy.
Yeah.
And then who else?
Or
Maggie Smith.
Keaton.
Diane Keaton?
Yeah.
Right, okay. But, you can name it on one hand, whereas the amount of men that just keep going until they're, Tina Fey and they had one that was a bit more filthy, so we won't go there.
No, I'd rather you didn't.
But look it up, it's
not
hilarious.
The last 30 seconds.
The last enjoyable day of a woman's life. I've just paraphrased that slightly.
Penny Ashton, thank you for being on the panel today.
Kakite.
Another sterling performance from your good self, Tim Watkin.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your educated company.
You're most welcome.
That's us for another week. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Thank you very much for your company on the panel. And coming up, Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Toti mai rā e hoa mā he kōrero, kei te haere, he kaupapa, kei te karawhiua. Kia ora, te reo Māori. Tonight on Checkpoint, the 21st Century Campaign Trail, fewer kissing babies, more stroking cats. We're with Bill English and Jacinda Ardern and his Hut South, an electorate set to change hands. Also tonight, Save Mart. First Union takes legal action as non-union and union members within the Newland branch appear to be segregated. Lawyers and advocacy groups for injured people are demanding ACC be transparent about its computer modelling. Freight trains are back between Picton and Christchurch, and last night we met Lynn living out her retirement in a caravan park. Tonight, your response.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. A major haul of chemical compound used in synthetic drugs that may be linked to 20 deaths have been made. The police say 75,000 fewer doses of the drugs will hit the street as a result. Laura Tupou reports.
Detective Inspector John Sutton of the Waitemata Police says they found 11 kilograms of finished synthetic drugs and 1 kilogram of AMD Fubinaca at a storage unit in Rodney, north of Auckland. He says Customs seized a further 2 kilos of raw compounds. One man has been charged with importing and supplying a psychoactive substance. In a separate investigation, the police have charged 3 people with supplying the synthetic drugs taken by 2 people before they died in West Auckland this week. Ko Laura Tupou aho.
More people than ever before are casting advance votes. Since advance voting opened on Monday, the number taking the drug has risen incrementally each day. Here's Siobhan Wilson.
With 8 days to go to the election, the number of advance voters has risen by more than half the number at this stage 3 years ago. Yesterday's number, 74,000, was up by 7,500 on Wednesday's count. Altogether, 229,000 people have already voted, roughly 81,000 more than at this time last election, and 172,000 more than in 2011. However, nearly 20,000 fewer young people have registered to vote compared to 2014. Only 72% of people under 30 are currently enrolled. Ko Siobhan Wilson aho.
Meanwhile, a group of low decile schools in Porirua and Hutt Valley have been encouraging parents to vote to enrol since the teacher union NZEI alerted them to low turnout rates in their area. Children at Kornini Primary School in Wainuiamata told RNZ News there are many reasons people should vote.
To affect change, so they have a voice. They should vote because what's best for the world? Because voting can affect change in the world. It's about what's best for the country.
School principals say encouraging parents to vote shows children they can have influence over their own futures and the country's direction. The Christchurch City Council is proposing to get rid of 85 of its lowest paid workers. The positions include many front-of-house staff, such as those at swimming pools and service centres. A spokesperson for the Amalgamated Workers Union, Calvin Fisher, says there's been a lack of consultation about the plan.
There's an obligation in the 2 current agreements that cover all of these people to talk to each other and open dialogue and all the other clichéic comments that councils have put themselves in a position to do. We haven't had 1 minute of input into this. We're scrambling to deal with a situation that too many of these people have been through before post-earthquake.
Calvin Fisher says the restructuring will also affect the hours worked by hundreds of council staff. The first freight train from Picton to Christchurch since the Kaikoura earthquake pulled into the city this afternoon to be welcomed by a crowd of more than 100. For the last leg from Kaikoura, it was driven by Wayne Sullivan, who was driving a train on the same line when the quake struck and had to be airlifted to safety. He says it's great to be back. Sullivan, Kiwi Rail says the line closure has cost it $40 million in lost profit, but repairs haven't taken as long as expected. Today's opening is 3 months ahead of schedule. 11 patients have been isolated at Whangarei Hospital after a suspected norovirus outbreak. The ward for elective and acute orthopaedic and multi-trauma patients has been closed to new admissions and the number of visitors will be restricted. The Northland District Health Board says norovirus is currently widespread in the community. British linguists have come up with a list of 30 defunct words from old dictionaries they believe deserve to make a comeback because of their relevance to modern life. The list includes ambodexter, meaning one who takes bribes from both sides, and betrump, meaning to deceive, cheat or elude. The York University researchers also like fumish or hot-tempered and ear rent, the cost of having to listen to trivial or incessant talk. It's 5:04. Sport, Grace Rasmussen, Jane Watson and Phoenix Karaka have missed out on the Silver Ferns team for the Constellation Cup series against Australia next month. They've been replaced by a younger trio who impressed during the Ferns' recent series. Bridget Tunnicliffe reports.
Hello.
The naming of today's team is a good indication of who will make next year's Commonwealth Games team. Mid-quarter Whitney Souness, who only made her debut 3 weeks ago, has been included, along with defenders Kelly Jury and Temelisi Whakahokoto. Rasmussen has been a staple of the mid-court for the past couple of years, but has been usurped by Gina Crampton and Souness. Defender Jane Watson was named ANZ Premiership Player of the Year, but didn't really fire during the recent tests. Phoenix Karaka is the other casualty in the defensive end. And relative newbie Sam Sinclair rounds out the mid-court. This is Bridget Tunnicliffe.
There's a late change to the Springboks team taking on the All Blacks in Albany tomorrow. Halfback Ross Cronje has come down with a stomach bug and he's been replaced in the starting lineup by Francois Hougaard. Meanwhile, former All Black Julian Savea will lead Wellington for the first time after being named captain of the team to play Canterbury in the capital on Sunday. The Auckland driver Scott Dixon was 6th fastest on the first day of practice for the final round of the IndyCar Series in Sonoma, California. Dixon will start Monday morning's final race just 3 points off the lead as he chases a 5th IndyCar title. That's the news.
Hello, I'm John Campbell. What about this election campaign? Human rights, renters' rights, dirty rivers, dirty politics?
Are you keeping count of the billions of dollars being promised? We are. I'm Guy Espiner.
And I'm Susie Ferguson. Who has to pay and who will have the say? Follow the money on Morning Report.
And Checkpoint, counting the costs.
And counting the votes on the 23rd of September.
And the morning after with me and Catherine Ryan, RNZ National Election 17.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Mostly fine, however brief rain overnight and early morning. For the remainder of the North Island, except for Wellington, rain developing later today with possible heavy falls, showers tomorrow, some thundery from Waikato southwards, easing in the evening. Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough, rain spreading eastwards today with some heavy falls, northwest gales in exposed places, becoming mostly fine overnight and winds easing. Canterbury and Otago, scattered rain and northwest gales for western areas, easing later tomorrow. Mostly fine tomorrow, however, a few showers for the Canterbury coast and plains until evening. Southland, scattered rain later today, fine tomorrow, apart from coastal showers clearing in the afternoon. Bullock, Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls, turning to showers later today. Rain and thunderstorms for Fiordland late tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today and rain later tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina, and thank you everyone for joining us. Just a reminder, if you are anywhere near a screen, you can indeed watch us on Facebook, and an enormous number of you are. Thank you. You can also watch us on Freeview Channel 50 and Sky TV Channel 83, which is Face TV. Coming up, we're on the campaign trail. The train line between Picton and Christchurch reopens. ACC and its computer modelling, synthetics, rugby preview, and much, much more. North Korea and what they are up to. But we begin tonight with SafeMart and legal action being taken against them by First Union on behalf of union members who claim they've been segregated from non-union staff and fear they are about to be laid off. We have more on that development shortly, but first, how we learned about this. This week we've heard from SafeMart workers who claim they've been exposed to health and safety risks by being denied the use of gloves while sorting through the clothing donations made via the big blue bins in many New Zealand neighbourhoods. The bins have Child Cancer Foundation on the side, but the foundation is a charity recipient, not the organiser. The nationwide business behind the bins is SafeMart and its parent. The workers we've spoken to told us about being denied the use of gloves and of finding syringes, broken glass, used sex toys and clothing covered in blood and faeces as they sort through the donations people have made. On Wednesday, WorkSafe told us they'll investigate health and safety standards. Throughout our coverage, SafeMart's owner, Tom Doonan, has declined our interview requests. But he's emailed us denying the accusations his workers are making, insisting gloves are available, that there are no health and safety risks, and rejecting claims his workforce is unhappy. So we asked to visit his workforce in Newlyn, Auckland. No interference, free rein to talk to anyone. And Tom Doonan said yes. Well, so we thought. What's your name?
Leanne.
Nice to meet you, Leanne. I'm John. Thank you for having me. So what are you doing here?
Sorting.
If you're listening, we've frozen the shot. Leanne is standing at a workstation with 2 pink bags in front of her, the kind that are put in letterboxes filled with used clothes, then collected from the curbside. They have Helps Children with Cancer printed on them. And all around Leanne are large, packed bales. They're everywhere. And so I am standing beside a very large wool bale that anyone who's ever been in a wool shed in New Zealand will recognise. Yeah, but what's inside there?
You have the collections from the thing. Do you want me to open it?
Yeah, I'd love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. The bales contain the clothes from the blue bins. It's an impressive business model. Most of the stock is donated by people giving clothes to support the Child Cancer Foundation, which is what's written on the side of those blue bins. There's no mention of Save Mart. And the Child Cancer Foundation does indeed benefit. That's not in dispute. But a far larger percentage of the revenue from those donated items goes to Save Mart itself. Let's go back to Leanne, opening a bale. So you're not wearing gloves?
No, I choose not to.
You choose not to? You could if you wanted to?
Yes, I could if I wanted to, but I choose not to.
Leanne's emphatic about that. And I notice the rest of the unexpectedly small number of sorters on the floor aren't wearing gloves either, which seems confusing. I'd been told this was a bigger workplace with more sorters. I'd also been told it was a somewhat grimmer environment, darker, colder, more bleak. We were at the rear of the Newland shop, but that's not where the sorters had told me they were. I am now at the back of the sorting area, and a curious thing has happened because over the past few days we've been speaking to people off the record via phone about their experiences of working here, a lot of people. And I've tried to find those people, and none of them are in this room. All the people who are here aren't the people we've been talking to. So I've asked permission to go to the part of the building where those people are. The union members seem to be working separately, and I'm just waiting for permission to see whether we'll be able to do that. Outside, Save Mart looks slightly past its best. A broken window, a sign not properly attached, a door that looked like someone may have tried to force it, the blue bins with child cancer written on them waiting for more donations. And boy, do those donations come. Inside the Newland store there are thousands of items of clothing, and this is one of 31 Save Mart stores nationwide. Collecting, sorting and processing these mostly donated items is big work. Nationwide, Save Mart is a relatively large employer. But where were the staff I'd been speaking to? So this is a very bizarre experience. We phoned this morning and asked if we could come out and talk to the workers, and we have been able to talk to some of the workers. But we understand the union members have been segregated and are working in another part of this facility. Clearly, we don't just want to talk to a hand-picked sample of workers. We want to talk to all the workers and have free range as we thought we were getting. So I went to the local on-site manager. She called Tom Doonan and asked for permission for us to go and talk to the rest of the workers, the ones who aren't here, and that has been declined. So what was presented to us as an opportunity to come and talk free and frankly to the workforce is simply not that at all. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people working here. There are, we understand, a larger number working next door, but we're not allowed access to them. And I can't really see the point of having let us in these circumstances. Either we can talk to the workforce or we can't. Can I give Tom a call?
Yeah.
Have you got his number? Yeah, can you pass the phone over? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. At this stage, we're freezing the picture. The local manager found herself with me and a camera person there, having to tell us we couldn't visit all the workers we thought we'd come to see. We promised not to identify her, but we asked her to call the owner back so I could speak to him, and as she did so, she began to get distressed. You all right? But she spoke to the owner on her phone. Does Tom want to talk to us, to me?
He's driving at the moment, he said.
Right, okay. Tom was driving and couldn't stop to talk. By this time, the local manager was clearly upset. We decided to go. I spoke to her away from the camera, explained we wouldn't name her or show her, and we left. And so as we passed the jewellery section, we're going to leave the Newland store in Save Mart. Sorry, the Save Mart store in Newland, having been invited out to talk to the workforce. We haven't really been able to. And that is that. Except it wasn't, because as we walked back to the car, we noticed an adjacent building that appeared to be connected. And one of the workers we'd met had told us the sorters who were union members were, quote, next door. I found them, having lunch break. They invited me in, but I decided against that and spoke to them through the door. Well, I don't think I should, because I might get you into trouble.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this, are all the union members over here?
Yeah. Yeah.
All the union members over here?
Yeah.
And the non-union members are
In the front.
in the fronts?
Yeah.
And did you all used to be together?
Yeah.
And where were you all together? In this building or the front building? This side.
Yeah.
So when we were allowed in to see that side, we were seeing non-union members in a workplace that you haven't previously been in. Is that right? Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that right? So where you actually work, and where you've always actually worked until the union and non-union members were separated, is here, is in this building. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, thank you. There were more workers there than on the other side. And amongst them, I presume, some of the people who'd told me over the phone about finding syringes, vibrators, broken glass, etc., as they sorted through the bales with no gloves on. It appears the workforce has been roughly split. On the other side, which we visited in the open, where we'd been allowed, Leanne was happy in her work and deft too. No gloves required as she sorts the bales.
I mean, you do find dirty things, but it's a case of being conscious of not, you know, as in any dirty job, you don't go putting your hand all the way in a bale, do you? It's about being conscious of what could be in there.
Clearly, Leanne likes her job and is good at it. But until recently, I was told she'd been with the others out the back. On the way out, I met two workers who told me they'd only been split recently. Union and non-union, they said. Formerly one big team, now two different teams, and, most importantly, in the context of our visit, two separate workplaces.
2 weeks ago.
All here.
Yeah.
So that woman Leanne I met and spoke to,
Yeah.
all in the back here.
All right in here.
Promise?
Promise.
Yeah, promise. Okay. Graham McKean from First Union, do you believe union and non-union workers have been segregated at the Newland Save Mart?
Yes, we're in a very strong view that there is an approach by the company to segregate, move the two sets of employees aside so that the company can go through a restructure basis and move the non-union to one side and make the union members redundant, because that part of the operation will no longer be valid. We've followed that up with a legal letter sent through to the company challenging on this, and we are still waiting a response on that.
So you are taking legal action, would that be fair to say, against Save Mart?
We are most definitely taking legal action against Save Mart.
On the basis of the segregation of union and non-union workers and your concern that non-union workers are being prepared to be laid off?
That's totally correct. So under the law, it's unjustified disadvantage, and we have a very clear and strong perspective on that. That is Graham McKean from First Union. We went to Tom Doonan this afternoon for a response to what Graham McKean had just said to us. We're waiting to hear back from him. As we said, Save Mart New Lynn is just one of 31 Save Mart stores throughout the country owned by Tom Doonan and his son Grant. Their company, the Textile Recycling Centre Limited, has been recycling clothing for 40 years. They opened the first Save Mart 19 years ago. Tom Doonan has refused to be interviewed every day this week, but he has answered written questions. He insists gloves are available for staff in stores, and they're sourced from Blackwood and Bunnings. We asked him why we were only allowed to speak with non-union members in Newland yesterday. He said he thought we'd already spoken to union members earlier this week, and he thought union members that were there when I visited. He has yet to answer any of the questions we put to him today and has declined to take our calls. But given the number of people contacting us this week unaware the clothing they put in pink bags or in the blue child cancer bags child cancer bins went to Save Mart, we also wanted to know how much Save Mart donates to charity. Now, Mr Doonan referred us to his website, and we've contacted the Child Cancer Foundation, the Methodist Mission and Kidney Kids to try and find out.
The Child Cancer Foundation has not got back to us. The Methodist Mission declined to comment until it had spoken with Mr Doonan. And Kidney Kids tells us the last donation it received from SaveMart was in May 2016, but received $50,000 over a 5-year period prior to that. We'll have more on this story after 6 o'clock tonight. It's 5:20. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. North Korea has once again thumbed its nose at the international community, launching yet another ballistic missile just days after the UN passed its toughest ever sanctions. The intermediate range missile this time was launched from a populated area near the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, and flew over northern Japan before landing in the Pacific Ocean. It sparked air raid type sirens in Japan again and text alerts to residents to take cover. Japan says repeated provocations on the part of North Korea are unpermissible and it will protest in the strongest terms. South Korea responded with its own missile launch. The BBC's Stephen McDonald has more.
South Korean response was swift. It launched its own missiles into the sea following North Korea's ballistic missile test. This region is again on high alert. In Seoul, President Moon Jae-in called an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. He said in this climate, dialogue is impossible, adding that his country must prepare for potential attacks from the north, including biological and chemical weapons. Earlier, North Korea test-fired a ballistic missile, the first such launch since the latest round of sanctions against the isolated regime. It flew 3,700 kilometres, landing in the Pacific Ocean, according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff. The missile passed over the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido, setting off alarms there. Warnings went out in the media and directly to telephones, urging people to seek emergency shelter.
We absolutely cannot accept these provocations. I call for an emergency United Nations Security Council meeting. The international community needs to come together and send a clear message to North Korea that it's threatening world peace with its actions.
Meanwhile, North Korea is showing no signs of slowing down the speed of its nuclear weapons development. Recent celebrations marking its 6th and largest nuclear test were televised.
That report from the BBC's Stephen McDonald, and the UN has, the UN Security Council will meet in an emergency session tomorrow in response to the missile test. Lots of feedback coming in on SaveMart. Thank you. The SaveMart story is remarkable. Reminds me of how North Korea manages foreign visits and controls everything that people see. Really foreboding that kind of thing goes on in the heart of New Zealand. Thank you for being in touch. You can, by the way, comment on anything you'd like on the program. You can text 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and we are, of course, on Twitter and Facebook. Coming up on the program, the first freight train since the devastating Keikoura earthquake arrives in Christchurch. That's pretty impressive work. And lawyers and advocacy groups demand ACC be transparent about its computer model, which predicts how long a client will use its services. With polls showing National and Labour neck and neck with just a week to go of the election campaign, the pressure is ramping up for Bill English and Jacinda Ardern. Ms Ardern hit the campaign trail today in Dunedin, while Mr English stayed closer to home in Wellington in the hotly contested seat of Hutt South, currently, of course, held by Trevor Mallard. But one way or another, that's going to change. Sarah Robson has more.
Can I get a photo?
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Wellingtonian Josephine Van Baal doesn't know who she'll vote for on September the 23rd. She met Bill English in a cafe today and they talked about what National has to offer her family, but she says she's still weighing things up.
Obviously we've got economic stability, as everyone's talking about it, but at the same time my husband's a teacher, so he sees a lot of things that need working on in that department, and also in terms of healthcare. Got family that are going through the main system and long waiting periods and things like that.
With National's candidate in Hutt South, Chris Bishop, and Transport spokesman Simon Bridges in tow, Mr English then visited a volunteer-run cat shelter in Lower Hutt.
Oh, darlings.
National thinks it's got a good chance of taking the Hutt South seat from Labour, and Bill English says they're running a strong campaign.
The Hutt Valley has got a growing economy.
we're running hard to win the seat as well as to maximise our party vote here.
Over the next week, Bill English says National will be sharpening up its messages to voters.
Public are coming to that point too, where the interest in the Labor leadership change has gone. Now they're looking hard at what is going to work for them and what's going to put more money in their pocket.
Down south in Dunedin, Jacinda Ardern was keen to talk about the first-hand effects of climate change, rather than her back down yesterday on tax changes. She visited Launcey McCullum and his family, whose home in the suburb of St Kilda was flooded back in 2015, forcing them to move out for several months.
Realistically, you know who's to blame in that in some aspects, but you haven't really had that we apologise sort of type thing for the mistakes that they have been made. So.
And probably what you just need is a bit of planning for the future so that you know that you're going to be okay. Yeah.
Jacinda Ardern was also out pushing her message to young voters at Otago University.
We can do this, we will do this, let's do this.
But it comes as the latest figures from the Electoral Commission show just 72% of under 30s are enrolled to vote, about 240,000 people. Ms Ardern says she's been encouraging young people to vote early so they can enrol and cast their ballot at the same time.
I hear an enormous amount of feedback from young people in particular that there is a mood for change, there is a mood for us to focus on the future for them, but it does take them casting their vote to make that change.
And the principal of Tairi College, David Hunter, says the change in Labour's leadership has shaken the political tree.
Our staff room has become quite interesting and there's some great political discussions taking place. I know workplaces and dining room tables are now discussing politically. That hasn't occurred in quite a while.
With 8 days until the election, Ms Ardern says she is trying to keep up a rigorous, high-energy campaigning pace.
Lots of positivity, talking about our vision for the future, but also talking about the issues that New Zealand desperately needs to confront, like health, like housing, like issues around the environment.
The latest Electoral Commission figures show almost 230,000 people have already voted. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
5:27, the first freight train since the devastating November earthquake has chugged into Christchurch after an historic 348-kilometre journey from Picton. Locals lined the platform in Kaikoura to welcome the train, the first since the 7.8 magnitude quake devastated the Upper South Island's main traffic corridor 10 months ago. And as Logan Church reports, now the main line is reopening. Locals can see some light, sorry about this, at the end of the tunnel.
The freight train thundered into Christchurch on time this afternoon, where it was welcomed by a crowd of over 100 workers, dignitaries and politicians. It marks a critical milestone in the repair of the South Island's transport network, with almost all of the freight that used to be carried on trains having to be hauled on trucks instead. The train's driver, Wayne Sullivan, was trapped in another train during the Kaikoura earthquake and had to be airlifted to safety. He says it was a scary experience, but is excited to be back on the line.
Quite happy to be on this train because I think KiwiRail stopped paying me until I finish this job, so it's good to get it done, yeah. Rail is the future, hopefully, here in South Island, and from all the support we've been getting, it's all signs say that it is, so it's good.
Earlier this morning, the train stopped in Kaikoura, with over 100 locals turning out for the occasion, some overcome with emotion. The seaside tourist town is still feeling the impact of the earthquake and is regularly cut off during bad weather and flooding. It was a special day for one resident, Bev Bradley.
I was here as a 5-year-old when the railway was first opened, so I had to come for the second time.
Bev says this will have a big impact on Kaikoura's recovery.
It's good for keep the trucks off the road, and also it is very good to be able to hop on a train and have a ride.
The train completed its journey this afternoon, and the man behind the line's rebuild, KiwiBuild's chief executive Peter Reedy, says today has been a long time coming. The closed line has cost KiwiRail $40 million in lost profit, but repairs haven't taken as long as expected. Today's opening is 3 months ahead of schedule. It increases the pressure on the Transport Agency to meet their Christmas deadline to reopen the quake-damaged State Highway 1. But Mr Reedy says having the open railway will help support workers rebuilding the highway.
During the day, we're using the freight trains to help rebuild the road. So they're bringing in all the building products and the materials that you need. So we're running 2 trains a night, and during the day we've just got to leave the track open for the building materials to come through.
Peter Reedy says there were many challenges along the way. Some tracks were twisted and broken beyond repair. About 60 bridges had to be repaired or rebuilt from scratch. But he says an operating rail line will bring a raft of benefits for the South Island.
Rail helps to reduce, cost of moving goods. So I think the final prices of products for retailers will come down. It also has a big impact for the the economy. We're 66% carbon efficient compared to trucks.
For the meantime, a freight train service will only run at night, so workers can help support the repair of State Highway 1. But Kiwi Rail says it's on track to have passenger trains operating by September next year. In Otatahi for Checkpoint, Ko Logan Church Tēnei.
Coming up on Checkpoint, a Bay of Plenty beekeeper has been arrested and charged with the theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of beehives from his own region, plus mobilising the youth vote. Where are you, youth voters? If you're listening. And an update on Lynn, the pensioner living her retirement out in a caravan at a Bay of Plenty campground, and your response to Zach's story about her last night. Nona next with business news, but before all of it, Katrina Batten live from the capital city with the headlines.
A major haul of a chemical compound used in synthetic drugs that may be linked to 20 deaths has been made. The police say 75,000 fewer doses of the drugs will hit the street as a result. Officers found 11 kilograms of finished synthetic drugs and 1 kilogram of AMB Fubinaca at a storage unit in Rodney, north of Auckland. A man has been charged with importing and supplying a psychoactive substance. In a separate investigation, the police have charged 3 people with supplying the synthetic drugs taken by 2 people before they died in West Auckland this week. More people than ever before are casting advance votes. With 8 days to go to the election, the number of advance voters has risen by more than half the number at this stage 3 years ago. Altogether, 229,000 people have already voted, roughly 81,000 more than at this time last election. Japan and the United States have requested a meeting of the UN Security Council tomorrow to discuss yet another North Korean missile test. The intermediate-range ballistic missile launched from Pyongyang Airport flew over northern Japan before landing in the Pacific Ocean. The Christchurch City Council is proposing to get rid of 85 of its lowest-paid workers. The positions include many front-of-house staff, such as those at swimming pools and service centres. A union spokesperson says the restructuring will also affect the hours worked by hundreds of council staff. The first freight train from Picton to Christchurch since the Kaikoura earthquake pulled into the city this afternoon to be welcomed by a crowd of more than 100. For the last leg from Kaikoura, it was driven by Wayne Sullivan, who was driving a train on the same line when the quake struck and had to be airlifted to safety. And a week after a major slip blocked a busy thoroughfare in Wanaka, the District Council has reopened one lane to traffic. The slip from a building site covered Lakeside Road last Friday. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Which is 27 minutes away. Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now to end the week, looking back over the week, and also before we review the markets, the housing market, Nona.
That's right.
People waiting to list properties because of wanting to list properties, or waiting to list properties?
Waiting.
Because of the election.
Well, that's what the indications are. I mean, what we've seen is that there are signs that the market is continuing to slow. Now, there's fewer houses being sold, and prices are down in Auckland overall. Prices are up over nationally. So we've got a 0.5% increase month on month, but
nationwide.
Yes,
yep.
But a dip in Auckland. So overall, Auckland values were down 2.9% compared with the rest of the country, which was up 7%. That's year on year, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, overall, prices were stronger in some regions, like Southland, for example, Northland. They were down in Southland, Northland, and Taranaki, Waikato, and Auckland. But in other places, they were up. It's a bit of a puzzle. The Real Estate Institute putting a fairly good spin on it, saying, well, it could be that people are holding off selling. Others would say, well, it could be that prices are falling because people are a little bit off the housing market for now. So it could be the election, it could be a lot of things. I guess it's too soon to say if it's a trend.
It sounds a little bit like, with all due respect to the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand, they are reading tea leaves.
could be.
Yeah.
I mean, because you really can't tell a trend over just a very short period of time.
No.
There's no doubt that higher interest rates to get a mortgage, higher deposits, the LVRs and so forth have had an impact. Uncertainty with the election is another aspect. I mean, there's a lot of things that would put people off. But however, we have seen consumer sentiment recently very buoyant. So
a lot of things that the people, not the least of which is that a lot of people can't afford to get into the housing market now, right?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
So they got other things to spend their money on, I suppose. Yeah, good times, right? Well, you're not saving for your house. You'd be saving for the rest of your life.
Right, how did the markets end the weekend? Have I missed anything else?
Well, you did kind of. If we have
the Shareholders
time.
Association,
yeah,
yes.
the Shareholders Association have taken Turner's Car, the auction company, the finance company. They're fairly large now. So Turner's, they've taken them to task because they didn't like the way that Turner's raised some funds this week. They raised $30 million, $25 million through a placement with large shareholders, institutions, and so forth, sort of basically cutting out the mom and pop shareholders and then offering them basically a $5 million issue. Yeah, the shareholders aren't very happy. These are the smaller shareholders. They're saying, come on. I mean, that kind of facility is for emergencies and small amounts of money. When you start raising $30 million, you should be opening it up to all the shareholders. They're not very happy. They're asking for questions. They're asking the board for answers. Watch this space. I think you're going to see the shareholders becoming a little bit more, especially now with a lot of Kiwi savers and so on, people are taking more interest in this. I think companies have to be a bit more accountable to shareholders. If you're going to do these things, why are you doing it in that way? What's the rush?
Good question.
Yeah. So, okay, how did our index end up? Well, we fell 0.75%, and that's not because of Turner's. That's really because of North Korea. And you could see that right across the region and even in Australia. So we were down 0.75%. Australia was down about the same. That was in our market 57 points to 7,763. The dollar was steady though, 72.4 US cents, 90.5 Australian, and 54 pence.
You sound like you're getting a cold.
Yeah, actually, I'm getting over a cold.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming to work, Nona.
What
Top effort.
Not sure.
Yeah. Have a good weekend.
And you.
Nona Peltier. The police and customs have made 2 hits in their fight against synthetic drugs. They've seized 3 kilos of the raw product used to make them, which would have a final street value of somewhere in the region of $1.5 million. And in a separate investigation, the police have arrested 3 people for supplying the synthetic drugs, possibly linked to the deaths of 2 people in West Auckland. Rowan Quinn reports.
The coroner's investigating 20 deaths around the country that may be because of synthetic drugs. Detective Inspector John Sutton says 75,000 doses have been kept off the streets as a result of the latest haul.
The police are very concerned that this drug is out in our community, and we're determined to do the best job we can to reduce that drug being circulated, and that's why we need the community to come on board and give us any advice, any information, and we ask the public, do not take this drug. We ask them, do not take this drug.
He says 1 kilo of the compound AMB Fubinaca was found at a storage unit in Rodney, north of Auckland, along with 11 kilos of finished product. Customs seized a further 2 kilos of raw compounds. 1 man's been arrested and charged with importing and supplying the drugs. AMB Fubinaca was nicknamed the zombie drug after people were badly affected by it in New York in 2015. But ESR scientist Kevin Walsh says the doses seen in New Zealand are up to 35 times more potent than the New York strain.
That's got to have a serious impact on people's health. When they were reporting from that Brooklyn incident, serious unconsciousness. There were no deaths, I believe, but people walking around in a zombie state. If you then compound that 10 to 30 times, and that's obviously going to have a very significant effect on people's health.
2 people died in West Auckland this week after taking synthetic drugs. The police say 3 men have now been charged with supplying the drugs they're believed to have taken. They say if the deaths are found to be linked to the drugs, they will look at the culpability of the supplier. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
Lawyers and advocacy groups for injured people are demanding ACC be transparent about its computer model, which predicts how long a client will use its services. They say they're concerned the model is based on getting people off ACC instead of helping them, and there are other concerns. Jessie Chang has more.
ACC says it has been using the modelling system, known as a survival analysis model, for 3 years. It uses information provided by nearly 2 million claims it receives each year to predict which clients are likely to need help and how long they will need the services for. ACC specialist lawyer Warren Forster, who is a member of several advocacy groups including Acclaim Otago, says that's troubling. He's concerned that private information from clients is being used to sort them into low and high risk categories, which the model can then use to figure out when to stop helping them.
The focus of the system once they get to a branch is on exiting the person within a time frame. And it appears that that is the statistic that's used to measure performance in accordance with this model as it moves back up through the chain. There's a real concern that people with the same injuries will be treated very differently based on their risk scoring.
John Miller, who is also a specialist ACC lawyer, says ACC has been known to reduce services in the past, and he's worried this is just another way of doing it. He says having a computer predict whether a person needs help or not dehumanises them.
I've seen too often, even with human doing the files, etc., suddenly cutting people off and leaving the poor injured person on the back foot. I'm even more fearful of a computer system because you're actually depriving people of their income in the treatment at a time when they could be and probably are very vulnerable.
But the Chief Customer Officer at ACC, Mike Tully, says that's not what the model is about. He says it is designed to process claims more efficiently and improve the way people are supported. Mr Tully says since ACC started using the model, the number of days it takes to set up weekly compensation for clients' claims has dropped from 11 days to 7.
It's a tool that enables our case managers to work out the priorities and needs of our clients and enables the organisation, ACC, to respond far quicker than what we've been able to do previously.
Mike Tully says because all the data is anonymised, there are no privacy breaches. The Minister of ACC, Michael Woodhouse, says since ACC was established, it has been collecting data from clients to make informed decisions on its services. He says it's nonsense to call the modelling system new or secret. Mr Woodhouse says the system is not being used to reduce services for injured people.
It doesn't predict it, it gives a guide to it because every situation is different. But when you're dealing with nearly 2 million cases a year, trends do emerge. And that's helpful for decision making. It's helpful for deciding what levies we set.
ACC says it will post all the information about the model on its website, including all the variables it uses to make predictions, by early next week. For Checkpoint, Ko Jessie Chang Aho.
Mobilising the youth vote has been a hot. I'm going to start this again. Mobilising the youth vote has been a hot topic in this election campaign, but in parts of Porirua and the Hutt Valley, it's school children who've been encouraging their parents to make their voices heard. The kids have been checking the electoral roll to see who's missing and convincing older relatives that they should sign up to vote. The school say it's all part of strengthening their communities and encouraging children to contribute to society. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, went to meet some of the kids involved.
Children at Koinini Primary School in Wainui-o-Mata have been experimenting in their classrooms with different forms of government, including theocracy and anarchy. That's convinced them democracy works best, and they say there are good reasons adults should get out and vote next week.
To affect change, because it helps change things. You need a leader, otherwise we're going to be one of those countries that don't have rules and there'll be lots of stealing. So they have a voice. They should vote because what's best for the world? Because voting can affect change in the world. It's about what's best for the country.
Principal Andrea Scanlon says the children have also learned about the voting process and checked if their parents are enrolled.
We had an evening here celebrating learning just recently, and the students asked their parents and checked for them if they were enrolled, and we had about 30 parents do that and about 10 registered there and then on the evening to vote. So that was really successful. The kids were really excited to see that their parents were enrolling.
The school is one of several in areas with low voter turnout that's using resources from Teacher Union, the NZEI and the Electoral Commission to raise children's awareness of the election. Andrea Scanlon says it's important schools show children their parents can and should be involved in the electoral process.
Our children, as they grow up, when they reach the age and eligibility for voting, it's important that they feel that they can contribute and have a part to say about who should govern our country. And so we want them to start developing that understanding now and knowing that it matters.
At Holy Family School in Porirua, the children are actively engaged in the elections.
The different policies they have about education is actually kind of mind-blowing to me. I had to persuade my nana to get into it because she wasn't enrolled.
I persuaded my dad to vote for one of the parties and research about them.
I also like talking about the elections with my dad when we're on the phone with each other.
The principal, Chris Theobald, says addressing low voter turnout in the area is a proper part of the school's role as the hub of its community.
A key part of that for us is looking at what other ways that we can make a dent in the world, we can impact society, and with a low voter turnout for young Māori and Pacific people, then we know that that's an area that we could hopefully make an impact.
Chris Theobald says the school has sent out 75 enrolment packs to local families and will have an early voting booth on Thursday. In Wellington for Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Lovely story, John. Thank you. Let's go to some sport now. The Four Nations competition, well, it's All Blacks, South Africa, Argentina and Australia has begun. The All Blacks have played 3 and won 3, but in a slightly muddled old kind of way. South Africa, they're looking pretty good. They're playing each other tomorrow night. The last time South Africa were the laughingstock of the Rugby Championship, which came as a surprise for such a proud rugby nation. Possibly second only to New Zealand in terms of rugby achievements. But as Matt Chatterton reports, 2016 was a long time ago for the Springboks and their staunch supporters.
The unmistakable sound of a braai. You can almost smell it. They'll be a familiar sight throughout Auckland's North Shore this weekend. Not only is the shore renowned for its South African population, it's also the host of tomorrow night's test between the All Blacks and Springboks at North Harbour Stadium in Albany. Just across the road is Spur Bar, a South African-owned pub that will be humming with Springbok supporters come kick-off. Co-owner Jaco Jordan says the All Blacks Springboks clash is always one of the biggest nights of the year.
We've diehard supporters since we were children in South Africa. We used to go do the braai before the game and then go watch the games in the stadiums. So for us, yeah, unfortunately we're working, but I mean we'll be supporting them. All our staff's wearing our Springbok jerseys, we'll have Springbok flags. So it will be a great dress-up for the team. So it will be good.
2016 was undoubtedly a write-off for South Africa. They finished second to last in the Rugby Championship and only managed to rack up 4 wins out of 12 tests throughout the year. 2017, though, has brought a renewed sense of optimism. The Springboks have already won 2 matches in the Rugby Championship with the new-look squad. Fellow Spur Bar co-owner Clint Barnard expects patrons to be full of hope tomorrow night.
In South Africa, we call something called gees. It's a vibe. Yeah, the gees is going to be amazing in our store. It'll feel like we're home.
That vibe stretches all the way to the Springbok team itself. Coach Alistair Coetzee says the belief within his side is at an all-time high, but despite the almost hometown advantage they'll have in Albany tomorrow, he doesn't believe it gives South Africa any greater chance of beating the world number 1 side.
Nothing at all. 2 sets of poles, 2 poles here, chalk on the field, referee, no different. It's it's a nice facility. QBE is a great stadium. I think we with the Stormers played the Blues here, if I can remember last time. We lost the game though, but it's a fantastic facility.
Coetzee may be unwilling to have a quiet confidence about him, but his supporters certainly think they know who'll win one of rugby's greatest battles.
South Africa, of course. We have to.
If Jaco's right, well, you know where to find tomorrow night's braai. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
12 minutes to 6. A Bay of Plenty beekeeper has been arrested and charged with the theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of beehives from the region. 120 hives were recovered last week. 80 more were recovered early yesterday morning when the 46-year-old was arrested in Northland. The industry's watchdog says thefts are on the rise and beekeepers don't feel safe. Sally Murphy reports.
The police believe the 80 hives, valued at $35,000, thought to be from the Western Bay of Plenty, are connected to the 100 hives found last week, worth as much as $200,000. Chief Executive of Apiculture New Zealand, previously the Beekeepers Association, Karen Koss says any arrest and recovery of hives is great news for the industry.
It's really good to see that the police are starting to get results. We know that this has been an issue for quite some time and that the police have needed to step up and take it more seriously, and clearly that's happening.
Ms Koss says thefts of beehives have been growing over the past few years.
The increasing value of New Zealand honey, particularly Manuka honey, is really likely to be a key factor. And we understand from talking to the police that it has become attractive to organised crime.
She says thefts can devastate a beekeeper's livelihood. She says there are ways to keep hives protected.
Where possible, keep hives and paddocks locked away from public view. Tracking devices and outdoor surveillance cameras wherever possible. That's a really good idea. And also just reporting the theft and movement of hives.
Just 2 weeks ago, almost 50,000 bees were stolen from a remote forestry block near Napier. The owner, Duncan Johnston from Arataki Honey, believes experts are targeting rural areas as only the best hives were taken. Detective Senior Sergeant Greg Turner says hives are worth anywhere from $600 to $1,000, so the trade is lucrative and people will go to great lengths to pass stolen hives off as legitimate.
Those hives had been disguised or rebirthed with false grower numbers being stamped on them.
Mr Turner says it's likely licensed beekeepers are buying the stolen hives.
Like a lot of crime, unfortunately, be a very small minority who create a market for this sort of stolen product. Degree of innocence, but like any industry, there's always one or two who will turn a blind eye to that bargain they may be presented with.
The beekeeper charged with stealing the hives appeared in the Whangarei District Court today and was remanded in custody. The police say if anyone sees hives being moved on unmarked trucks around the North Island, they should call the police. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Now to some pretty delightful news about our story last night. Following up on Tauranga pensioner Lynette Haynes. Lynn is 69 years old and struggling to make ends meet. She's living out her retirement in a caravan. Zach Fleming brought us the story last night. Many of you were struck by her incredibly positive outlook on life despite her situation, which frankly was pretty utilitarian. Simply no money to get by on, living in a caravan park, and that was kind of her life. We're going to stay on the issue of pensioners living in poverty, and we'll have more next week as we run up to the election. But tonight, here's Zach Fleming with an update on Lynn.
Job offers, gift hampers, gift cards, movie tickets, even offers of accommodation. Help was flooded in following our story last night. Lynn, a single, job-seeking grandmother, is living alone in a tiny caravan just 3.3 metres long at a Mount Maunganui campground.
With the global financial crisis and my job loss, the bank couldn't give me a mortgage loan, so that went down the gurgler. So I kept hopeful, and that's why I kept applying for jobs.
But hope doesn't pay the bills, and that's Lynn's problem. The cheapest one-bedroom units in Tauranga that are suitable for long-term stays, as in not just an uninsulated converted garage, go for around $300 a week. The pension is $390 a week.
Okay, I could go out tomorrow and rent a little place and hand all my income, my pension income, over to the landlord, but that means I've got nothing left for dental care, health care, keeping tyres on the car, keeping the warrant and the registration going, putting food on the table, all of those things, I just couldn't have them.
That's a brief summary of her situation from yesterday, but it doesn't convey Lynn's intense and earnest positivity, which is what struck dozens of people who watched or listened to her story.
Hello, Lynn here.
Hey Lynn, it's Zach.
I have just had a ball sitting with Vicky in the office, and we've just been looking and reading and laughing and talking about the way things are out there in this New Zealand that we call home. I'm just overwhelmed.
What did you think of reading those comments? What was going through your mind?
Wow, there's so many people out there like me, and so many people out there so loving and kind, and people out there very concerned about what's going on in New Zealand right now. So yeah, I'm thinking, wow, I'm blown away.
Were you expecting that kind of response?
Well, no, I wasn't. I didn't know what would happen, and yeah, I'm a bit overwhelmed. It's amazing.
She's received, among other things, job and accommodation offers, tickets to the movies, and offers of dinner and coffee at the homes of strangers who watched Checkpoint last night.
Oh, wow, that is absolutely brilliant. Oh, how lovely. I didn't expect anything like that. I didn't expect anyone would do this. That's just so lovely.
Yeah, a lot of people were touched by your story, Lynn.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'm so, like I say, I maybe see 2 movies a year if I'm lucky, and I go on a Tuesday morning on a pension day.
Well, now you can definitely see more than 2 this year.
Oh, that will be just so lovely. I really will appreciate that. That is a beautiful gesture. Yes, it's wonderful. Oh, how lovely. They've made my day. They really have. So you say to the people, thank you so much, because I don't know who they are, you do, and I'd like to convey my very express thank you for that. They've just been brilliant. It's absolutely wonderful.
We'll keep you updated on Lynn's situation. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
And to everyone who contacted us after Zach's lovely story last night, thank you. Aotearoa's greatest Māori musical talent is converging on Hastings tonight to celebrate the 10th Waiata Māori Music Awards. The awards, established by the late composer and teacher Tama Huata, will be another celebration for Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. Te Manu Korehi reporter Te Anawa Huri Hanganui filed this report.
Macy Rika has been nominated 5 times in tonight's Māori Music Awards, including for Best Female Solo Artist and Best Māori Songwriter. Her most recent album, Tira, is also nominated. She wrote the Christmas album completely in Te Reo Māori, a language she says is a window into her Māori world.
Waiata, it takes you to a different place, a different realm, because, you know, our reel's been handed down from generation to generation, from our tipuna down to us. So for me, it's the extra wide work that it needs.
Macy Rika says when she travels overseas, it's her songs written in te reo that people want to hear the most. Her favourite song on her newest album, Takumana, is among them. Another nominee, Amber Tengongo, is a finalist in the Song of the Year by a Māori artist in the Reo Māori category. Her song Mau Tonu is about holding on to who you are despite the challenges the world might throw at you. Amber Tengongo says Māori music is on the rise and Waiata helps Te Reo Māori thrive.
I think that it's actually picking up a bit more. Well, what I've noticed, I think that it's becoming more and more popular. It definitely helps play a big role in the revitalisation of the reo.
Kiwi music icon Dave Dobbin has released his song Welcome Home in Te Reo this week to coincide with Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. He worked on the new version No Mai Rā with Mai More Music and says it was a challenge worth every second.
It's an honour for somebody to do it with one of my songs, so I thought you've got to stand up to that and give it the dignity it deserves, and it's become its own waiata.
Dave Dobbin says he hopes to sing more waiata in te reo in the future and encourages all New Zealanders to give the language a go.
There's another language that goes on underneath all that binds it all, the musical language of the heart. So to fit into it and rise to the occasion is sort of, I guess it's a challenge to other Pākehā to give it a go, get a lungful of air and sing that at the rugby.
The Māori Music Awards ceremony in Hastings will honour the late Bunny Walters, Wiramu Te Tauhuata, and Kiri Tokia e Te Tō Mairangi Adrian Gale Paki. Mo te hōtako te ahi pōnei, ko te aniwa Huri Hanganui aho.
What a lovely way to lead us into the news. 50 seconds before it. What percentage goes to child cancer? Their clothes are really quite expensive. Free stock, poor staff. Good on you for exposing this, says somebody about SafeMart. It's not in dispute that money goes to child cancer. No one is disputing that. It's just no one knows how much of what SafeMart pulls as a result of having that donated clothing actually goes to the charities. We really would love to know that. But some money does go to charities, full stop. I believe SafeMart purchase used clothing, washed, sorted and sold for an increased price. My daughter is a kidney kid, but I will no longer purchase clothes from there. I bought many items for school productions as a drama teacher, but will no longer do so as a PPTA member. I support all unions, says Jennifer. Thank you for your feedback and thank you for being with us. It's 6 o'clock on RNZ.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The National leader, Bill English, is brushing off criticism that the government misled the public about its controversial sheep farm deal with a Saudi businessman. National has always argued its deal with Hamoud Al-Khalaf was to avoid an expensive lawsuit, and it had advice from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to back that up. But ministry documents released 2 years after being requested under the Official Information Act show no such advice was given. Mr English says the issue has already been dealt with.
People have the right to go to the Ombudsman. Sometimes there's differences of opinion about it. But all the issues that are involved in that have been heavily scrutinised and questioned over the last 2 or 3 years. And frankly, a week out from the election, we're pretty focused on the issues around voters making their choices for the election.
National's leader, Bill English. A major haul has been made of a chemical compound used in synthetic drugs that may be linked to 20 deaths. The police say 75,000 fewer doses of the drugs will hit the street as a result. Detective Inspector John Sutton says they found 11 kilograms of finished synthetic drugs and 1 kilogram of AMB Fubinaca at a storage unit in Rodney, north of Auckland. He says Customs seized a further 2 kilos of raw compounds. One man has been charged with importing and supplying a psychoactive substance. In a separate investigation, the police have charged 3 people with supplying the synthetic drugs taken by 2 people before they died in West Auckland this week. 3 investigations have failed to find who was responsible for leaking information about Winston Peters' superannuation overpayments. The Department of Internal Affairs today became the 3rd government agency to clear its staff of wrongdoing. Sarah Robson reports.
The New Zealand First Leader admitted last month that he had been getting more money than he was entitled to, but that when he found out, he repaid what he owed. However, questions were raised about who leaked the details and several investigations were initiated. Internal Affairs says 5 staff and ministerial officers got the information before it was reported by media, but there's no evidence they passed it on to journalists or others. Earlier today, the Ministry of Social Development cleared its staff of wrongdoing. Inland Revenue says it found it held none of the relevant information, so it could not have been the source of the leak. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The government says it's nonsense to suggest ACC's computer model aimed at predicting how long a client will use its services is about getting rid of people on ACC. Lawyers have criticised the model, saying it lacks transparency, pigeonholes individuals and is focused on cutting people off. The ACC Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says in fact the model is about helping to process claims faster and improve customer service. He says since ACC was established, it's been collecting data from clients in order to make informed decisions on its services. ACC says that by early next week, it will post all the information about the model on its website, including the variables it uses to make predictions. The Christchurch City Council is axing the jobs of 85 of its lowest paid workers and creating 99 new positions. The jobs being cut include those of many of front-of-house staff at places like swimming pools and gyms. The council's head of sport and recreation, John Fizzle, says its network of pools and sports centres will double over the next 4 years and it needs to realign itself to best meet the needs of the community. The Amalgamators Workers Union, representing many of those affected, says there's been a lack of consultation about the plan. Apiculture New Zealand says beehives have become the target of organised crime, so the arrest of a beekeeper suspected of stealing 180 hives is a good start. A 46-year-old Bay of Plenty man arrested in Northland yesterday appeared in the Whangarei District Court today, charged with theft and receiving stolen property, and was remanded in custody. The Chief Executive of Apiculture New Zealand, Karen Koss, says beehive theft is on the rise and some keepers don't feel safe.
It's really good to see that the police are starting to get results. We know that this has been an issue for quite some time and that the police have needed to step up and take it more seriously, and clearly that's happening.
Karen Koss of Apiculture New Zealand. Many flights in and out of Wellington Airport today have been cancelled or delayed because of strong winds. The airport says it's waiting for the wind to subside before telling passengers of alternative flights. Continuing wind gusts at Sydney Airport have also forced the cancellation of dozens of domestic flights today. International flights have not been affected. It's 6:05. The All Blacks captain Kieran Reid is calling on his side to produce a performance the fans can be proud of in their final home game of the year. The game is against South Africa at North Harbour Stadium tomorrow night. After a drawn line series and somewhat unconvincing wins over Australia and Argentina at home, Reid still believes his young side is trending upward.
The amount of guys who have had exposure has been great, and as you said, I think it's just builds us nicely for the future. I think it's important for us to finish our year at home well, so can't wait to do that in front of our home crowd and looking forward to it.
Kieran Reid. The resurgent Springboks know tomorrow night will be their biggest test of the year. South Africa managed just 2 wins in last year's championship and suffered 2 heavy defeats at the hands of the All Blacks. This year they've beaten Argentina twice and drawn with Australia. They haven't won in New Zealand since 2009, but assistant coach Johan van Graan says they're not thinking about the past.
You learn from every single test match. 2017 was about a new start for us as a team. So I haven't really focused on the past. Obviously we want to improve test by test, and this will be our first measure against the New Zealand side in New Zealand for 2017.
The Springboks assistant coach Johan van Graan. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights there's a mixtape from Barnaby Ware. Country Life visits North Canterbury's only llama ranch. Expect the spit to hit the fam. We look forward to this weekend's relaunch of the relocated Christchurch exhibition Quake City with curatorial manager Sarah Murray, which will go nicely with a sonic tonic dedicated to the songs and sound bites of museums and galleries. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, where admission is always free. After the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to tomorrow midnight. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa mostly fine, however brief rain overnight and early in the morning. For the remainder of the North Island except for Wellington, rain developing later today with possible heavy falls. Showers tomorrow, some thundery from Waikato southwards, easing in the afternoon. Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough, rain spreading eastwards today with some heavy falls. Northwest gales in exposed places becoming mostly fine overnight and winds easing. Canterbury and Otago, scattered rain and northwest gales for western areas easing later today. Mostly fine tomorrow, however, a few showers for the Canterbury coast and plains until evening. Southland, scattered rain later today, it's probably about now. Fine tomorrow, apart from coastal showers clearing in the afternoon. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland rain with heavy falls turning to showers later. Rain and thunderstorms for Fiordland late tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today and rain later tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Earlier in the program, we were inside Save Mart in Newlyn, Auckland. We've been looking at Save Mart all week after workers at the clothing recycling stores complained about their working conditions. Over the past week, we've spoken to current and former employees from throughout the country who've told us they're not allowed to wear gloves when they're sorting items that are collected from the blue child cancer clothing bins. They told us their health and safety has been compromised on occasions when they come across broken glass, household rubbish, soiled nappies, underpants, even dead animals and syringes. Save Mart's owner Tom Doonan has repeatedly refused all our requests for interviews. Tom, if you're listening, we'd love to talk to you now, but insists workers are provided with gloves. He did allow us to visit the Newland store yesterday where we discovered the staff were segregated and only the non-union members were available to speak to us. The union that represents the Workers' First Union is taking legal action against the textile recycling company which owns SaveMart and its owner, Tom Doonan. This former employee worked at SaveMart Newland for 4 years. Her story mirrors the stories of at least 20 staff members we've talked to this week. No gloves, no pre-sorting and very difficult working conditions.
People would defecate in our changing rooms and we would be expected to clean it up, but we weren't given gloves, we weren't given bleach, anything. We were given plastic bags, a broom and a mop with hot water.
Tom Doonan, the owner, has told us there are gloves freely available for staff to use and he gets them from Bunnings. Was that your experience in the 4 years you spent?
No, never. The only gloves we were ever semi-provided with was woolen, fingerless black gloves to wear on the shop in winter because it gets so cold.
So in terms of sorting and the material that you might find as you were going through those bales, you were never offered gloves?
No, and when you were asked about it, you were strictly told you can't feel if the product is wet, damp or muddy, that sort of thing, and so therefore you can't have gloves.
What did you find during your time working there? What did you come across in the bales?
It was very rare that I sorted. I was mainly shop floor staff. However, if the shop floor staff questioned or misstepped or just did anything that they considered wasn't okay, we were sent to sort for a few days as a punishment, like it was a threat that hung over our head. But you'd find everything, dead animals, needles, nappies. It was horrible. People would throw out shoes that clearly had to be put in the bin, not, you know, like just the soles of jandals, not the whole jandal. Like, it was bad.
Tom Doonan has repeatedly said to us that what we are saying on air doesn't represent the reality of life working in the sorting room at SaveMart. He has repeatedly insisted that gloves are available. He has repeatedly insisted that pre-sorting removes things like broken glass or syringes or pooey nappies before the sorters get to them. What's your sense of the reality of life as a sorter at SaveMart?
The only bales that are pre-sorted are the ones that come from another store, their last year's stock that hasn't sold, and it'll get moved to another store because that's already been priced on the floor. Everything else, the drivers pick it up from the side of the road, they close the bales up, and that gets delivered to the sorting people. There is no pre-sorting except the bales of old stock from other stores.
So when Tom Doonan tells us that bags are pre-sorted and therefore the risk of coming across a pooey nappy or a needle or broken glass or whatever is not high, that is not your recollection from 4 years at Newland SaveMart?
No, 100% that is not true, with the exception of the old stock, obviously.
From other shops?
They are not pre-sorted.
How are workers treated at SaveMart Newland, and can you be as fair as you possibly can in your description on the basis of your 4 years there?
We're treated like criminals. It's expected straight away the second you walk in that door that you're there to steal from them. There's no faith, there is no trust. We were specifically told you're not allowed to talk to each other while you're working, which because I'm the manager now and I employ people, I get that because you want people working and not just gossiping. But we were also told you cannot socialise with your co-workers outside of work hours. Like it was, and they play you off each other. They don't want you. Yeah, you're treated like criminals. The staff are not allowed to buy anything, which seems silly because it's the same money. We don't get discount. It's going to charity. If you find something, you're going to buy it because you say we've got Saturday off. You want to buy it on Saturday, you find it on Friday, you're not allowed to put that on hold overnight because it's treated like you're going to steal it. It's just ridiculous. Come summer, it was not uncommon in the Newland branch for ambulances to be called because customers would faint from the heat in there because there's no proper air conditioning. The staff were in a similar thing. We weren't allowed drink bottles. When questioned, the manager, Robin, specifically told us, and I was there for that the reason we're not allowed drink bottles was because someone might spike them. That was her excuse for not allowing us to have water in the heat of summer when customers are fainting.
Ambulances were called, customers fainted.
Because of the heat, you go in there around December, summer, there is no aircon. It's a warehouse full of people. The changing rooms, it's with people would faint from the heat.
Oh, that is a former Soapmart employee. She also told us that Saturday was their busiest day and they could pull up to $20,000 through the tills on a Saturday. Obviously, we would love to talk to Tom Doonan about all of the stuff. 31 stores, lots of their stock donated through the child cancer bins. Obviously, child cancer is a recipient of that money rather than the organiser. They have nothing to do with the way the business is run. We would also love to ask Tom Doonan what percentage of the revenue from the donations goes to donations. But in the past few charitable donations, but in the past few minutes, there's been a development of this story. We're joined now by First Union organiser Graham McKean, who is on the phone. Graham, are you there?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, hi, nice to talk to you. Live on air. Look, when I spoke to you this afternoon after having been out to the shop yesterday, my sense was that the workers were segregated, union and non-union. We could only see the non-union. You confirmed that with me on the phone this afternoon, but there is a more recent development now?
Yeah, that's correct, John. So as of this afternoon, the union members have been given notification of redundancy. So they've got 4 weeks left of employment, then they'll be cast aside and they'll have to seek new jobs and new lives.
Can you be absolutely certain with me that it is the union members and not a workplace that is being made redundant?
So the information that I've had is that the WorkSafe inspectors were there today inspecting the premises from your previous shows. During that time, the union members who we represent, were given notification of redundancy. So that's my clear understanding. How broad it goes, I could not say. But at the moment, we've got a whole bunch of union members who primarily, well, they're all women, and you know they've got commitments, children. Some of them are solo mothers, and they're distraught and don't know where to turn. I've been fielding phone calls from people who are upset, and so we now have to navigate our way through that.
How many union members? This is New Lynn, isn't it? So for the people who don't know Auckland, this is a kind of West Auckland suburb, a large retail premise with sorters working out the back. How many union members do you have there?
So we've got 10 members there, John.
And they've all been made redundant, or are being made redundant?
That's my understanding.
And do you know whether non-union members are being made redundant?
I couldn't make comment on that because I don't represent non-unions, so I wouldn't have that information.
Can you explain when the staff was segregated? I was a bit struck when I went out that there were sorters at the back of the shop, but the staff members told me that previously they'd been all together in a pretty underwhelming kind of hangar/building facility beyond the shop. All the sorters, union and non-union, had been working together. It seems that the non-union were moved into the back of the shop to work separately in the past few weeks. Is that your understanding of what's occurred?
That's entirely correct. So everyone worked together in one workplace. As the union became involved and the discussion started to become a little bit more urgent, the company went in during the weekend, segregated the workstations. On Monday morning, the non-union members went to one side of the building and the union members were kept separate. And you were there today. You saw the big cage that separates the two work areas, and it's. I don't say this lightly, but it's almost concentration type situations.
Certainly, there's real tension between the union workforce and this manager Tom Doonan and the union as well, right? First Union are taking legal action against SaveMart.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be a considered process. These are irrational actions that have fast-tracked something where there should have been genuine consultation, People were entitled to representation. The union has been writing letters since April of this year to raise all of these issues and should have been a party to this. And it is not the actions that a fair and reasonable employer could do.
Have you spoken to Tom Doonan today? Has the union managed to speak to Tom Doonan today?
We have received a letter from Tom inviting me to meet with him on Tuesday, so I'll be attending that meeting, and we will sit down for the first time in all the months that we've been trying to contact him and have some discussion.
It's Graham McKean joining us live. Thanks, Graham. Graham McKean is the first union organiser who represents those people. Now, obviously, balance requires that we talk to Tom Doonan, and we have been trying to talk to Tom Doonan since we first started doing the story on Tuesday. I'm just looking through. It was Tuesday, Bridget? Yes, Tuesday, I think we first began covering this. Tom Doonan hung up on me. When we phoned, our producer Bridget Burke has phoned repeatedly since then. We have sent emails, we have texted. We would really like to hear from Tom Doonan. He was sending us emails in response to written questions, but even those have dried up. So, if you think there is a lack of balance in this story, it is not for want of trying by us. We would really like to talk to Tom Doonan. We welcome him into the studio for an interview at length on Checkpoint about what is going on, how much of the money he earns from donated clothes goes to charities, why there seems to be the segregation between union and non-union workers, whether non-union workers are being laid off as well as union workers. There are lots of things to discuss, Tom, and we would love to discuss them with you. It's 6:20. The Prime Minister, Bill English, is brushing off criticism that the government misled the public about its controversial $11.5 million sheep farm deal with a Saudi businessman. The government has always argued its deal with Mahmoud Al-Khalaf was to avoid an expensive lawsuit, and that it had advice from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade to back that up. But ministry documents released 2 years after being requested, under the Official Information Act show there was no such advice. Bill English told our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell that the issue has already been dealt with.
Well, all of those issues have been looked into by the Auditor-General, and the Auditor-General pointed out some procedural issues that could be dealt with better, but otherwise it's been dealt with.
But did Murray McCulley mislead taxpayers, Parliament and the public about the government's putting the money into the project?
Well, all of those claims, that claims was made some time ago, and the Auditor-General's looked at all that and made some recommendations about a few procedural issues, but that's about it.
Was that money a bribe?
No, look, there was arrangement made there with the Saudi government. It's all been scrutinised in great detail by the Auditor-General, and we're happy with the position that was reached and the ongoing relationship with the Gulf Cooperation Council.
Is it okay, though, that Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade held on to this information for 2 years and then releases it a week before the election?
Well, they work with the Official Information Act. People have the right to go to the Ombudsman. Sometimes there's differences of opinion about it. But all the issues that are involved in that have been heavily scrutinised and questioned over the last 2 or 3 years. And frankly, a week out from the election, we're pretty focused on the issues around voters making their choices for the election.
Is the public service politicised? Is that what this illustrates?
No, it doesn't illustrate that. I think if there was a concern there, the Auditor-General would have raised it, because the Auditor-General's used to scrutinising how the public service and government interact.
Bill English talking to Chris Bramwell. Labour's Foreign Affairs spokesperson David Parker said the news that no legal advice existed is a perversion of democracy.
They've dragged the government department into covering up for the minister that there was never any legal advice to support the $4 million cash payment to a Saudi businessman who was not owed a cent. They've wasted $12 million or $11.5 million. They've flown sheep to the other side of the world. They've clearly lost their moral compass.
That is David Parker. The Green Party leader James Shaw said today's revelations show that Murray McCulley acted in a, quote, grossly improper way when he sanctioned the $11.5 million payment. He says he's outraged by the situation and agrees it raises questions about National's trustworthiness.
I think this is a massive dent on National's credibility. I mean, they absolutely fought this one tooth and nail the whole way along. They've withheld documents. I think in this case it seems that Murray McCulley misled not just Parliament but his own cabinet colleagues as well as the New Zealand public. It is incredibly serious, and it raises, I think, very disturbing questions about how the National-led government's been prepared to do business.
Green Party leader James Shaw, we know that we're going into the weekend, but if you have an opinion about this, do text us on 2101 or email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And speaking of going into the weekend, it is exactly 24 minutes past 6 now. A Whanganui woman who's restored a heritage building in the city to its former glory says it's been a labour of love. Kerry Goodwood thought the Kitchens Pharmacy building, bought it 2 years ago for about $300,000, has since spent about $800,000 earthquake strengthening and refurbishing it. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin went along for a tour.
Yeah, do, come on. So here we are at the bottom of the stairs. Very elegant stairway that curves up from the bottom floor right up 5+ metres to the top floor. When it was built, all of this, you can see walls around here, the stairwell, when it was built it was entirely open. And the pharmacist had his business on the ground floor and he and his family lived upstairs. And at the top of the stairs is still the bell that would have been sounded from downstairs to say, need some help, come on, woohoo.
Albert E. Kitchen had owned a pharmacy at number 15 Victoria Avenue since the 1870s and had the current building erected in 1909. A chemist operated there until the 1980s. Rather misleadingly, the inscription on the facade reads 1858, which refers to when Kitchen first set up business in the city. Described in the Whanganui Heritage Inventory as a fine example of Edwardian Baroque, in more recent times the upstairs had been a student flat. At the top of the oak and Rimu stairway, it opens up to a 3-bedroom apartment complete with surprisingly spacious living quarters. Indoor-outdoor flow has been incorporated into the renovation.
Come and have a look off this little balcony, what you can get onto it at the moment. Just open this little door and step out onto the balcony. Gets all the sun, lovely sun, and if you look out a wee bit and over to your right, you can see down to the river.
Oh, yeah.
You can see pretty muddy at the moment, pretty mucky looking.
It's been a lot of rain.
This is a great place to watch the passing parade. Cup of coffee or a glass of wine later in the day. Yep. And here you can see over on each side of the doorway, you can see these huge columns which have been strengthened, and you can also see the elements that are drilled right through the column and held them back into the facade.
Back inside, it's a short walk across the polished matai floorboards to a bedroom where those students have left a surprise.
A rather special window from when that currently just goes straight onto a brick wall. When the building was built, it was standalone, and now there's a brick wall from the next door building. The various students have lived here, have all left their names and various messages in chalk on the brick wall.
Oh, brilliant.
So it's going to stay there.
And that's a beautiful old sash window.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yes, it's lovely.
The renovation has not been all about heritage, however. Aged 74, Kerry has also looked to future-proof her new home.
So this passage used to go right through the house from front to back. Mm-hmm. And 3/4 of the way towards the back, we now have another door, and that's the entrance to the lift. And all of this up here, and just outside the lift upstairs, all of this is geared for wheelchair use. And room for a live-in companion. That's calling the lift, and so we now go into the lift. And down we go. Oh, wow. It's hydraulic, it's water power. With a little bit of freezy breeze up the knees as the air is displaced. Exactly.
So it's kind of like a lift shaft version of the ones that go up stairwells?
Yeah.
Would that be right?
Yes. It's a moving platform.
Yeah, yeah.
The platform itself moves. And there we are, outside.
Oh wow, internal garaging and the whole works. Kerry says she had her family's blessing to do the refurbishment, and the 2 retail spaces on the ground floor should pay for her largesse over time. In Whanganui for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tene.
Just before we go tonight, lots of feedback. Hi John, great to have coverage of Save Mart and discrimination against union members. I've often shopped at several Save Marts, including Newlyn. I'm always struck by what cold barns of places Save Marts are, freezing. Thanks, Di in Christchurch. Hi John, the Onehunga Save Mart, which is another Auckland one, is an oven in summer, a freezer in winter, big open tin roof warehouse. I'm a frequent shopper to Save Mart when I come to Auckland. Never again, Gus Donaldson. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Gus. Speaking of good work, Checkpoint is a team effort, and I've written down the team because we've got 40 seconds to spare, and I was going to show you them, but they don't want me to show you them tonight. Oh, there they are, the control room shot. That's going down like a lead balloon. Go Calvin. Pip Keane is the executive producer, Catherine Warbridge the associate producer, Bridget Burke is the producer and getter, Calvin Samuel is our director, wonderful director, Rangi Powick is doing sound, Zach Fleming our brilliant reporter, Bradley White our cameraman, Nita Blake Pearson and Michelle Cook do social media for us. I think that's our team. Really, that's our team. That's our permanent team. On behalf of all of us, thank you for being with us. We'll be back Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The National leader, Bill English, is brushing off criticism that the government misled the public about its controversial sheep farm deal with a Saudi businessman. A major haul has been made of a chemical compound used in synthetic drugs that may be linked to 20 deaths. It was found in a storage unit in Rodney, north of Auckland. The South Korean president says dialogue with North Korea is impossible at this point after Pyongyang launched yet another missile test. 3 investigations have failed to find who was responsible for leaking information about Winston Peters' superannuation overpayments. More people than ever before are casting advance votes for the general election. The Christchurch City Council is proposing to get rid of 85 of its lowest paid workers. And strong winds have caused cancellations and